see over there. Maybe go this one.
You want me to do that? Either one, I don't know.
You can do it.
That's not mine.
And that's not yours. But you must be in the machine. They must have it.
They must.
Yeah.
Surely.
So I think we're going to get underway if everybody could take their seat. Welcome, everybody. My name is Mark Wigley. I'm the Dean of the Graduate School of Architecture, Planning and Preservation. And we're very honored that the Mayor's Institute is chosen to have their meeting here with us. I don't imagine there will be very few students in the room because we have done everything we can over the last 3 months to bring them to the point of no survival. Most of them are lingering in hospital wards, in nursing homes. Some are wandering aimlessly around New York City, trying to understand what happened as part of the glorious experience of being trained to think about the future of cities. So it's really wonderful that in this moment, there's an unbelievably fresh, exciting group of leaders comes into the building in the wake of the destruction that occurred in the last week to think of this amazing question. And in particular, the question posed for this evening, how are cities designed, which of course presupposes that cities are designed, which is a thesis that was severely damaged for a good 50 years. And the thought that there is design in cities is quite a rebound of an ambition from the end of the 19th century at least. So we are in a very, very particularly interesting moment. So it's not just that we are as a school very, very proud that you've chosen to be with us, but we think the kind of conversation you're going to have is also going to be enormously helpful for us because in theory we are positioning ourselves around the very same question. My role, I think, is just to give a few words of introduction and also especially to welcome to the school John Coatsworth, the Provost of Columbia University. And then you will have an exciting lineup. Kaz Holloway, Deputy Mayor of New York City, is going to be the keynote speaker. And then Vincent Feltesse, the President of the Bordeaux Urban Community in France, will also speak. And I think this is almost a historic moment in the history of the Mayor's Institute, I think, the way in which European mayors are now, in a way, adding another layer to the utterly interesting internal conversations of the American mayors. And the thought is just to have a very, very nice evening of introducing and framing the conversation before an even nicer dinner, I think. But just to say in particular why it seems so important that you are here, and the things I want to say very, very quickly will be shockingly naive, but in a moment in time in which we are heading towards having something like 70% of the world's population living in cities, we may be heading towards 70% of 9 billion people living in cities. The question, what is the future of cities, has become an unbelievably urgent question, a question that cannot be confined to a school of architecture, cannot even be confined to Research University of the power of Columbia University. That is to say, at the very least, every single part of Columbia is going to need to think about this question. But really, it's an untested hypothesis whether cities can accommodate this kind of astonishing increase in capacity and density while maintaining dignity, equality, and so on. But it is to the mayors that we could listen to the sound of what this great experiment means. In other words, if you're taking care of a city of 1 million people, you are very much at the center of this question. Equally, if you're taking care of a city of 28 million, or as in some parts of the world, cities that have literally gone beyond the ability to count. So this would be the first point, that we are all united here in addressing the question, not even how a city is designed, but what would a city be? I mean, will cities be able to be? Related to that is, of course, another kind of simplification that increasingly it seems that we live in a world of cities, not a world of nations. So in fact, the very fact that mayors of cities are getting together goes directly to the source of the new forms of intelligence that will be necessary in the future. That is to say, cities are evolving more quickly than universities, and if this is the case, then evolving cities have become the real laboratories of our field, and we have as much to learn from the mayors of cities as they have to learn from the deepest research capacity of a university. So I think it's absolutely wonderful that there is this very equal exchange of intelligence and expertise. This is certainly not a situation where a School of Architecture is offering guidance or kind of clarification of the kind of more empirical, more embedded work of the mayors. The mayors are themselves operating as intellectuals, and I think the Mayors Institute is exactly a research organization in the classic way of a university. So here you have a university that wants to be in the cities of the world, thinking about the future, and you have the mayors of those cities wanting to act like a university. So I think it's very, very nice that we are coming together. In particular, I'm very, very proud of the urban design program here at the School of Architecture for acting as the host for this event, and I particularly want to thank Richard Plunce, the director of the program, and Moshe Baratalu for having made this possible. Just so you know, we are a quite unique school in the sense that almost any part of the city, we have a program. So in 1881, the university said, you know, we need to be intelligent about the future of cities. America was going through rapid urbanization. It was 29% urbanized in that moment, was very, very quickly, in 40 years, going to be 50% urbanized, but was only 15% urbanized 40 years before. So this school starts in the same year of Coca-Cola, by the way. So we're not innocent of the question of globalization and all of that. The school, the university says we need to be intelligent about cities in a moment in which America needed to be intelligent about cities. But of course, we're in New York, so we are close to America. We're very close. You can see America on a good day. But mainly, we're an immigrant city. That is to say, we are a city of the world. So this question, what is the future of the city, has been since 1881 asked in this school in a kind of global sense. But now the entire planet is 50% urbanized and 6 or 7 times the population. So in other words, the academic question that this school was formed around has magnified enormously. So we started with architecture, planning, urban design, preservation, real estate development, and so on. We keep adding different strings. But what I think makes the urban design program so important is, on the one hand, it includes all of the other programs in the school. You cannot imagine urban design without architecture, without planning, without real estate development, without preservation, without critical thinking. So somehow it's at the epicenter of the school. But not only that, the UD program is enormously hospitable to a wider array of fields, from technology, from science, from cultural affairs, and so on. So in the UD program, you have this very interesting program whose core unit of analysis is a neighborhood, whereas the architects think about buildings and the planners think about large cities. But of course, the trick here is that the urban design program uses the microenvironment of a neighborhood to address macro issues. So this is also the program that deals with the biggest issues of climate change and technological shift. So you have chosen incredibly good partners here at the school. And I think if there's any part of the school that can enter into a very direct dialogue with mayors about the potentials of their field and the kinds of questions we're facing and the kind of research we need to do, it's the urban design program. So I again want to thank Richard and Moji for really having done something very special for the school. And hopefully, I think for the mayors, you will realize what a wonderful relationship this could be. But this is all by way of introduction of John Coatsworth, and everything I have said so far would explain why the school is honored that John has agreed to sort of, as it were, open the events of this conference. John is not only, or even at all, partially the provost of a great university, but he's a great provost of a great university. But he's also an authority on what used to be called Latin America, and now I think we need new language for this. But this is a real scholar of the complexity of the evolving planet that we live in, and he's the dean of the School of International Public Affairs, which is that part of Columbia most dedicated to the sort of global interactions at the level of policy and decision-making worldwide. If I would say which are the 2 schools at Columbia most urgently thinking the question of the city, it will be SIPA and the School of Architecture, and this is in itself an indication that we live in a different world today in which the expertise required to think about the city is different. So I welcome John both as a wonderful person and wonderful provost, but also as one of us, as a leading intellectual on the question how to think the future of cities and so on. So I'm very, very honored to welcome my friend John Coatsworth.
Well, I think after that introduction, I should begin with a really serious attempt to lower expectations. I want to wish to all of you who are new here and to old friends a warm welcome to Columbia University, whose official name, as you may have discovered, is Columbia University in the city of New York. That's the name of the institution. City of New York, part of Columbia's official name, reflects the importance Columbia attaches to its location in one of the world's truly global cities. Mayor Michael Bloomberg has estimated that more than 140 languages are spoken in this city, many of them, perhaps most of them, taught in some form or another in our public school system. I was once conversing with a friend who said he had found himself, an Argentine, who found himself on a New York City subway train not long ago, and in front of him were two Dominicans chattering to each other in the kind of Caribbean Spanish that goes a mile a minute and drops all the consonants. But even though he was from Argentina, he could more or less follow what they were saying. Turned out that one of them had newly arrived in the city, and the other fellow was someone who had been here for a while and inquired of him how he liked New York. And the newly arrived immigrant said, "Oh, I like it a lot. It's so close to the United States." But putting the name of New York City in the name of the university is for more than just location. Over 400 full-time Columbia faculty and a large number of practitioner faculty in our professional schools of business, law, international and public affairs, public health, and social work on urban problems and issues. They are affiliated with dozens of research institutes and centers devoted to all manner of urban issues. This may be the largest concentration of researchers and professionals devoted to the study of urban issues anywhere on the planet. But the jewel in Columbia's very urban crown is what we affectionately call GSAPP, the Graduate School of Architecture, Planning, and Preservation, probably, or no, certainly, the best such school in the world. Leading this amazing enterprise is its extraordinary, globe-trotting, and brilliant dean, Mark Wigley, who you've just heard from. Let me thank all of those individuals and organizations who have made this impressive gathering of mayors and urban designers possible. The Regional Plan Association, whose president I think I just met. Tom, are you here? There he is. The New York City Mayor's Office and the Office of the New York City Deputy Mayor, Cass Holloway, who you're going to hear from in just a moment. The French-American Foundation of the United States. The President of the Bordeaux Urban Community, Vincent Feltesse. Sorry, he's here? There he is. And of course, all of the participating mayors who have come from near and far to attend this mayor's conference, and especially, I should say, special thanks to the Urban Design Group here at the School of Architecture, Planning, and Preservation. Sometime in the past year or so, the world's population slipped silently past a milestone in human history. For the first time ever, more than half of the world's population lives in urban areas. Many members of this new human majority live in cities that were not really designed very well for human habitation. Some are villages that grew into towns and then cities and then huge metropolises without any pretense of design, let alone intelligent design. Many more live in urban areas designed, if one might call it that, to accommodate commercial, industrial, or even governmental activities in surroundings that still lack adequate housing, safe drinking water, or access to electricity, schools, or healthcare. And still more inhabit spaces where such necessities are accessible, but in an urban landscape designed less for human fulfillment than for the convenience of machines and monuments. So I think it's important and perhaps even critical to the future of our species, that the mayors of great cities take the time, as you have been doing since the Institute was first created in 1986, to step away from the day-to-day duties that keep you so busy, to go back to school, as it were, to exchange ideas and reflect on the future of cities, on how our communities can become safer, healthier, more sustainable, more beautiful, in short, more human. A few weeks ago, Mayor Bloomberg was here with private sector leaders and mayors from around the world as part of the New York City Global Partners International Summit to discuss job creation and the economy. He noted that mayors often move faster than state or national leaders in the U.S. because they are physically closer to the problems they are expected to solve and thus are more hands-on in their approach to them. In addition to being interim provost, I'm also, as Mark said, the dean of the Columbia School of International and Public Affairs, where graduate students can choose to focus on urban policy as one of our 6 concentrations or majors. Under the guidance of Esther Fuchs and former New York Mayor David Dinkins, SIPA's urban policy students leave the school prepared to think critically about the economic, social, political, and technological forces that shape urban policy around the world. They benefit a great deal from the courses that they are also able to take in urban design and urban planning here at GSAPP. We're also fortunate at SIPA, as the School of International and Public Affairs is affectionately known, to host the Global Mayors Forum, which brings mayors from around the world to speak on urban policy and discuss best practices with faculty and students. Most recently, the mayors of London, who appeared with Michael Bloomberg in a hilarious confrontation, the mayor of Rio de Janeiro, and the mayor of Karachi. To conclude, let me repeat my warm welcome to all of you on behalf of the university and leave you with 3 suggestions you are free to ignore. The first is the suggestion that you take this time away from day-to-day issues and crises to think outside the boxes in which we all must work to be effective. It may be that our boxes are too confining. Certainly there's no place better than GSAPP to open the mind and to get creative juices flowing. My second suggestion is that you ruthlessly exploit all of the resources, both human and material, that this institute and the school lays before you. If you can go home with 1 or even 2 or 3 great ideas, your cities will be better for it, and you will surely win re-election. Probably win re-election. Finally, my third suggestion is that you take full advantage of this wonderful city. Stay an extra day or 2 or even more and do some exploring. New York is endlessly fascinating. Thank you all very much.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Dean Coatsworth. Thank you to the RPA, Rob Pirani, who I think is probably responsible for having me considered to be part of this great event. Mayors, I'd also like to say hello to Columbia University in general, and Esther Fuchs, a former member of Mayor Bloomberg's team and an essential one. It's great to be here. I'm Cass Holloway, Deputy Mayor for Operations of New York City, and I want to let you know I have turned off for probably the first time in, 8 or 9 months, both of my devices, which means that, and I figure I can do that because I'm in a setting where what could possibly happen to me when we're talking about these urban issues that are so important to everybody here. But if anything does happen, Dean, I'm going to have to tell the mayor that it was your fault. So, I'm told that this group is particularly interested in how you actually implement big ideas. And that's lucky because I guess sometimes the mayor, when we're working together on something, You know, there's the expertise of people who are transportation experts, and the health commissioner, and the transportation commissioner, and on and on. And then he looks at me, the deputy mayor for operations, and says, and whatever you do too. But what I am responsible for primarily, the portfolio that I oversee, includes all the basic city services. So maybe I'll start with a little bit of that background. I oversee the Department of Sanitation, DEP, which is Water and Sewer Service. I work with the Police Department, the Fire Department, the Office of Emergency Management, Office of Management and Budget, the Law Department, and the Mayor's Office of Contracts, which actually oversees more than $14 billion in procurement a year. So basically, if you have a problem in New York City, I'm probably the person that you should talk to. And in addition to all of that, I am fortunate to have under my direction the Mayor's Office of Long-Term Planning and Sustainability. And that is the office that is charged with implementing Mayor Bloomberg's Plan YC, which just this year released the update to the plan that was initially released in 2007. And that plan is a comprehensive blueprint for making New York City sustainable for the next 20 years and beyond, when we estimate that more than 1 million new people are going to come and live in New York City. So what does sustainability mean? It means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. The way I think about it practically is how do we build and develop in a way in New York City that is going to enable us, with 1 million more people coming here and 8 million people already here, to make it livable, to enable people to be close to a park, to have the energy they need to provide basic services, to be able to get around. It took me a little longer to get here than I expected because of the normal December gridlock. How are we going to make sure that this city as a Delta city is girded against the climate change that I think everybody sees is happening around us? These are the questions that Plan YC seeks to address. Now, Plan YC itself is a great document. It is something that I think is a great blueprint, but getting it done is a challenge that I think far surpasses the challenge of putting it all down on paper. It consists of 132 different initiatives that span all those areas that I talked about a few minutes ago. And some of the things that we've done in the first 4 years of the plan, we've planted more than 500,000 trees. We've enacted a greener, greater buildings law that's going to get us some of the retrofits in New York City. We have more than 950,000 buildings to become more energy efficient. We've already achieved a 13% reduction in citywide greenhouse gas emissions. We've also converted 180 schoolyards to playgrounds, and we've created the first municipal brownfield office in the country, which is the first chapter of the original Plan YC that's totally complete. That's a check the box. That office is created, and even though we were resisted at first at the state level and ultimately the federal, now will soon, I think, be standing with Lisa Jackson, the EPA administrator, who's going to be congratulating us and also has endorsed our plan to make federal funding available for projects in New York City through this office. We've also released the New York City Green Infrastructure Plan, which I'm going to talk a little bit about. But getting all these things done and all of the 132 initiatives in Plan YC requires a couple of things. First, I guess something that everybody would credit the mayor for, which is what he does, he's a very data-driven executive, is measure what you're doing, track it ruthlessly, and hold managers accountable for getting it done. And I think as a first step to implementation, that's obviously right. I know what the 132 initiatives are. I'm not going to sit here and name them for you, but I have a general sense categorically of where we are. In fact, today I sat in an hour-long energy meeting where we went through the biggest initiatives, and I'll show you a couple of cool charts that came out of that. And maybe it'll be best to just go to an example here. Sorry. So just on that tracking, which is one of the basic management tools that you use, how do we figure out how to get this done? One of the goals in the plan is that we are going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from the city sources, not the entire city. The entire city 30% by 2030. For just the city of New York, 30% by 2017. This waterfall shows exactly where we're going to get those greenhouse gas reductions from. Retrofits, operations and maintenance changes, our wastewater treatment plants. Before I was Deputy Mayor for Operations, I was Commissioner of DEP. We treat more than 1.3 billion gallons of wastewater a day. We're one of the largest energy consumers and greenhouse gas producers in the city, so that's why it was such a big chunk is there. Solid waste, clean distributed generation vehicles, down to the 1% items that are really important, but also at the end of the day, you know, 0.3% from new construction, and of course, clean energy supply. So this kind of an exercise where you are identifying how you're going to achieve a goal, break it down to its constituent parts, and then everyone in city government has some responsibility for some aspect of this, and by, you know, keeping up and tracking things in this way, you can basically say, where am I getting my points? So that's one way of doing it. And here you can see kind of the way we try to map this is what this chart shows. I know that to get to my 100% of my goal, 30 by 17, I have to get each of these blobs over to the 100%. So I know that about 610 metric tons are going to come from retrofits. That's one of my biggest places where we're going to get that benefit. And we're at 13% right now. It's between 0 and 20%. So we have to get all the way to 100% by 2017. But you can see the emerging technology, clean energy, those are already finished. But that's only a couple of points. So, you know, it's great, but we still have a long way to go. But it's by putting together analyses like this and knowing exactly where you're going to get the points and meet the goal and kind of ruthlessly paying attention to those things, that is step one. But it's not enough. It is not enough to implement a plan of this magnitude. And I guess the question that I thought about, and I'm going to use water as one of the ways to illustrate this. The question I thought about is, to get this done, to have a plan that you can carry through to 2030 and beyond, you have to make sure that the sustainability plan itself is sustainable. How do you make sure that it's not just a good idea that fades away when Mayor Bloomberg leaves office? I think the way I think about that is you have to make sustainability part of the DNA of the way the government operates. And that requires going agency by agency and figuring out the role that they play in implementing all of these 132 initiatives. And then whether it's by building an office or changing the specifications in your capital plans or changing your budgeting process, or, you know, there's 10 different ways to do it. You want to put things in place that aren't simply dependent on one really motivated individual or one great idea or, you know, one iteration of Plan YC. You need to do things that actually change the way that the government and particular agencies get things done. So what's an example of that? Well, I'll start with, I want to talk a little bit about water because I understand that a minor focus of this is water, and it happens to be an area that I've spent some time in. But the Department of Environmental Protection, which does that 1.3 billion gallons of wastewater treatment, and then also delivers 1 billion gallons of water a day from up to 125 miles away. This is the agency that's responsible for many of the Plan YC initiatives. So there are two articulated goals in Plan YC related to water. The first is to ensure the high quality and reliability of our water supply, that 1 billion gallons a day. So at a high level, then that breaks down into a couple of specific initiatives, infrastructure, and the truth is that Plan YC 1, the way that we dealt with this infrastructure question, and I remember because I was there when we were drafting it, we really realized we were spending billions of dollars on infrastructure, so we may as well take credit for it in the plan, right? And that includes City Tunnel number 3, it includes a filtration plant in the Bronx, it includes a UV disinfection plant about 25 miles outside the city, and so it's that infrastructure, by building it, we're not only making the city's water supply reliable, they're also climate change investments, because as we see the amount of rain and other weather events affecting which water you can use and divert to New York City, the more diversification you have, the more easy it is to deliver that 1 billion gallons a day. But in order to really advance the plan, you can't just finish the things that were already in the planning, right? And one of the things I'm most proud of from the time at DEP is that we were able to convince the mayor that in order to carry through the logical extension of the plan, to live up to our obligation to make New York City's water supply reliable for to 2030 and beyond, we needed to look at the investments that had to be made in addition to what we were already doing. And one of those that we are going to break ground on before the mayor leaves office in 2013 is the bypass for the Delaware Aqueduct, which is a $2 billion project that is going to be a 3.5-mile long bypass about 600 feet below ground, that the entire Capital Division of the Department of Environmental Protection is focused on breaking ground on. We call this project Water for the Future, and it truly is the next great engineering project for the Department of Environmental Protection. This is something that the agency, if you looked at it 2.5 years ago, people knew this was a problem, and we had done endless study on it, but it could have very easily been another 10 years before anybody decided it was time to allocate the funds. Not only did we not want to wait because the leaks that we're fixing are leaking 35 million gallons a day, but also because Mayor Bloomberg is so committed to the goals of Plan YC and following through, putting our money where our mouth is in a responsible way, that it wasn't hard to convince him to do this. Now, the second goal in the water space is to improve the quality of our waterways, to increase opportunities for recreation, and restore coastal ecosystems. Our way of doing this, and this was not conceived of in Plan YC 1, is the Green Infrastructure Plan. And I think this plan really, and the creation of this plan and now its implementation is the best illustration I have so far of what I mean when I say making sustainability part of the DNA of government. When I got to DEP, I consolidated the environmental planning division and a couple of other environmental divisions into a new unit of sustainability, and I appointed the commissioner's first deputy commissioner for sustainability, and then an assistant commissioner for green infrastructure. Now that deputy commissioner for sustainability, he happens to be my successor, Commissioner Carter Strickland at DEP, now that I've, I guess, gone on to certainly different things in addition to this at City Hall. But the creation of that unit and the development of this plan really got the entire agency thinking in a different way. What the legacy of this effort is going to be that we have designed and now we have put into every public roadway project that will be produced in New York City as we spend, hundreds of millions of dollars a year on infrastructure, green elements that are going to capture stormwater so that we reduce the amount of combined sewer overflows that go into the rivers that surround New York City, and that impairs water quality. And as somebody who has spent, I guess now, longer than I ever planned in city government, there's nothing more effective in terms of trying to institutionalize something than putting it in writing and making it a specification. Because it is not often that people take a step back and they say, well, how do we do this whole process? My goal is to be able to come back here to the city and go into the DEP and take out the spec book, and hopefully they've made some adjustments and some additions to what we've done, but it would also be fine if they hadn't looked at it for 10 years, because as long as the green elements of these infrastructure projects are not optional in the sense that they must be built in to the way that the Department of Design and Construction designs our right-of-way projects, then this plan's going to get successfully implemented, or at least it has a really good chance of being successfully implemented. And it's not dependent on, Carter, who was extremely motivated and just a wonderful deputy commissioner for sustainability who brought this plan to life. The people who come after him will be able to pick up this roadmap and continue and grow. Just to give you an idea of what this is going to look like, I think that, so making it part of the DNA of city government, that is something that has to happen. But I think there are two other elements that I want to touch on, and then I won't take too much longer. I think you also have a burden with sustainability to try to prove that it makes economic sense. That doesn't mean that every project is going to be more cost effective than the non-green project or the non-sustainable project. But in the overall, especially in this economic environment, you have to be able to show what your benefit is going to be, and that at least from a cost perspective, you're either getting a longer investment timeline out of it, or you're avoiding some other potential downside liability by making the smarter green investment. Because before the green infrastructure plan, projects like this street-side bioswale, our Office of Management and Budget looked at those things as, quote, amenities. And so you can imagine in these times, even though every commissioner wants to put these amenities into their projects, the first thing that gets cut when you are trying to move a capital plan from 4 years to 5 or cut the overall budget are the amenities. Now, when you take these amenities and you make them part of a regulatory requirement that you have to meet, and if meeting that requirement costs less than it would otherwise cost to go do it kind of the old gray infrastructure way, well, then you have a recipe to get the Mayor Bloomberg and the budget director willing and ready to commit $1.5 billion to this plan, which is where we are today. At a time when, let's face it, the economic picture has been very difficult now for a number of years. 30,000 construction workers are out of a job. One place where there's plenty of infrastructure investment is in the municipal sector, in government, and this plan is bringing, rather than the single one-shot huge project, this is actually an adaptable, scalable plan that I think is going to be able to deal with this problem over the long term. It also performs better. That's the second thing you'd like to be able to show. It makes economic sense even better if the sustainable solution performs better than the alternative. This waterfall chart shows on the right-hand side under the so-called gray strategy, which is a series of tanks and tunnels, and we're investing in some of those where they're cost effective. But under the gray, we anticipated reducing and still throwing off about 19 billion gallons of combined sewer overflow by the time this investment timeline's over. We do 2 billion gallons better, and I know we're going to do better than that under the green plan. So that's how we were able to convince the regulators that this made sense. In addition, even better if you can show that you're getting more than one thing done with your tax dollar. We opened a 50 million gallon combined sewer overflow tank at Paradigate Basin in Brooklyn about 8 months ago. Now, that tank has a green roof, and that green roof is pretty cool, but the tank itself only gets used if it rains. And once it gets full in a significant rainstorm, which we're having more and more of, then its capacity to do what it's designed to do, prevent CSOs, is spent. When it's not raining, that tank is sitting underground, unused. The great thing about green infrastructure is it does a lot of other things in addition to helping us meet the water quality standards that we need to meet in order to open up the waterfront and continue to make New York a place where these million people want to come to live, work, raise their families. And that's in the form of increased energy, reduced energy demand, just the aesthetics of and the air quality benefits of green. In fact, we estimate, and this is where SIPA and the academic institutions can do a lot for us, because I think one area where the research really needs to back up what I think is evident, and we're seeing some of this research, for example, by the U.S. Wildlife Service, but to quantify these so-called sustainability benefits that go along with these major investments. So you can say, I know how much CSO I'm capturing, but I can also quantify to a fairly significant degree, what is the air quality improvement I'm getting? What is the energy reduction benefit that I'm getting? And we have some good data about this, but it's going to continue to get better and better. And what we'll see, I think, is that it will no longer make sense to simply look at the big gray investments as the way to go. And then finally, for the green infrastructure plan, the fact is it happens to cost about $2.5 billion less in public money than the gray infrastructure alternative. And so I can tell you, as the person who had to go out and convince people that it was okay that their water rates were going up for the 17th straight year, in these economic times too, it's not a conversation you'll love to have. This is a way not only to convince the regulators and the mayor, but also the public that this is the right thing to do. Now, all this is an illustration of the planning that is required, at a granular level to implement a plan like this. And in New York City and the dense urban environments that you all are coming from, it's not just the concept of, oh, well, we'll do some green infrastructure and that'll handle the problem. The city is really investing the resources to be the best at this. And that's because that's how the mayor works. If we're going to do something and commit to it, when he committed to do the bypass for the tunnel, the $2 billion project, after he was convinced that it had to be done on the merits, he only asked me one question. How can we make sure that the people who come after us don't decide to pull the plug? Well, you can never guarantee, right, for those who live in New York City and know about the Second Avenue subway and other projects that have taken a very long time to get, now that it's actually happening. That's terrific. But I think, as Henry Stern, one of my former bosses and a mentor, reminds me every now and then, the initial bonds for that project were floated in the 1950s. So projects can take a long time to carry through, but getting a shovel in the ground is your best chance. And that's why I said to him, well, we got to move right now so that we can sink one of these shaft sites as one of the final things that you do before you walk out the door. So the mayor is deeply committed to the success of this. I think this plan just shows, ideally this will be a success if, when this administration moves on, and it will, the administration that comes after not only decides that this is the right thing to do, but because of those additional benefits, the aesthetics, the green, the open space, it won't be politically viable to go back. This will be something that, and Dan Wiley's here from Congresswoman Nydia Velazquez's office, it'll be something that that the communities will be putting pressure on elected officials to ensure. This will be a question: what is your stance on the green infrastructure? Are you going to continue it? And the answer to that will have to be yes. So there's a practical element, an economic element, an institutional element to the changing the bureaucracy to actually produce outputs that are sustainable, and then a political element. Make it unacceptable to actually go in reverse or take it in a different direction. I'm going to do just 2 quick slides to say what's next, because we're not all water. Water is a big part of the plan, but air quality. You're going to see a big things from the city. We put rules out that eliminate the dirtiest heating fuels, number 6 and number 4, and we're going to be forcing the city to move to natural gas and number 2. And I think this map tells the story of where air quality is bad, and one of the big surprises from this was everybody knew it was bad in some of the more industrial parts of the city, but it turns out that some of the worst air quality around is in some of the most, I guess, valuable real estate in the city. So, this is a problem that we need to deal with, and it turns out that by eliminating number 4 and number 6 heating oil, you're taking the equivalent of all the cars and trucks off the street combined on an annual basis. So we're going to be doing this, and again, that is something that we're going to be doing with the private sector, another massive enterprise, and then an area where I started when I came into city government in '06, and we put the solid waste management plan through the city council. Back then, we thought this was a great victory for solid waste in that we were moving from largely truck-based disposal of solid waste to rail and barge, and that's great, and we are implementing that part of the plan. But the bottom line is that New York City's dealing with its 18,000 tons of waste that are produced a day is not sustainable over the long term. We can't be shipping all of that waste, no matter, even if the way we're shipping it is environmentally friendly, to South Carolina, Pennsylvania, and parts east and south endlessly. Number one, that export cost is about $300 million a year now, and it's only going to go up. And 2, I firmly believe that at a certain point, people are going to say, whoa, we have our own problems, deal with your own garbage. And there are two primary ways to do that. Make less of it, 3 ways. Make less of it, recycle it or reuse it, or dispose of it in a way that's not landfill, so-called waste to energy. And I can tell you we are putting together a plan that's going to have elements of all three. I guess I will stop there, but it really is an honor to speak to this group. And let me give you my email address in case people want to get in touch about any specific initiatives or follow-up. It's Kaz Holloway, C. Holloway, CHOLLOWAY, at cityhall.nyc.gov. And on behalf of Mayor Bloomberg, thanks for having me. Questions?
In the commercial waste, are you including chemical waste from hospitals?
Yes. I'm sorry, and is your question in the, ask again?
In the commercial waste, are you including the waste coming from hospital, the chemical?
Biomedical waste? Is that what you're asking? Well, biomedical waste is,
It only says office buildings.
oh, on the slide? Well, so here, the way that waste is collected in New York City is actually split. The city, the municipality, the Department of Sanitation collects residential and institutional waste, and that includes not-for-profits and any hospitals and things. And so if it's not on there, it certainly includes any elements of the waste stream that the city collects. But we're also doing a characterization of the commercial side, and there are ways that we can also incentivize on the commercial side more recycling and reduction. So one thing we don't do a great job of collectively is putrescible waste, food waste. I think it would be great to come up with a plan that would enable us to do something to capture and recycle more of that. Although there's not a heck of a lot of room in New York City itself to do big composting, but we're working on coming up with something. Anybody else? Sir?
Yes, I was kind of curious about the stormwater management program that you described. Can you give us a little insight into making that work at the street level? How are you implementing that? How are you getting homeowners to buy in and also even commercial property owners?
Sure. Well, first and foremost, the plan itself, the CSO reductions, and that's achieved by capturing stormwater where it falls rather than have it go into the sewer system where it then overwhelms the system, and then you get that mix of sewage and stormwater going into the surrounding waterway. So first, that's the idea. The plan itself and the reductions that we're trying to achieve in the plan are based first on what we can control, which is the right-of-way projects, the rooftops of schools and public buildings, the properties that we have access to. And so the reductions that I showed you, anything we get on top of that in terms of getting the private sector to do retrofits or do green roofs, blue roofs, and so forth, is so-called gravy for the purposes of this, in getting the plan off the ground. And by that I mean getting our regulators, state DEC and the EPA, to agree that we can attack the problem in this way. So how are we getting the commercial and the private sector to buy in? Well, first of all, we're changing the rules. We are in the middle of the adoption of a new stormwater rule in New York City that's going to increase tenfold the amount of or decrease by tenfold the amount of stormwater that you can allow to run off your property, the speed of runoff going from 2.4 cubic feet per second to 0.24, which means that as a matter of policy, all new construction, once that rule is adopted, is going to have to meet that standard. And so one of the things we've done in the plan, and I'll just show you, those little red dots, they represent the permits that were issued in that drainage area over the prior 10 years. And while development certainly at the beginning of I guess the second decade of the new century has been slower, although we're seeing a slow uptick in new construction permits, and that's something we also track. We use that as a proxy for what we think the development picture is going to look like over the course of the next 20 years, and we think we're going to get the equivalent of about $900 million worth of green infrastructure investment or stormwater capture investment, just by virtue of the fact that in order to build a new home, a new building, and so forth, you're going to have to meet this new runoff standard. Now, in addition to that, we're also doing grant programs at the community level for both private buildings and community buildings to do green infrastructure investments. And out there in the world, if you see the Douglas Durst or the Tishmans, the big developers, they're leading the way in adopting these practices themselves, in part because I think, especially in the Durst example, they are just firmly committed to it as an idea, and that it makes sense in terms of building for the long term. But also, clients are demanding it. Firms that move into new commercial space, they want so-called green leases. They want to know that they're working in a building that, if it's not neutral in terms of its environmental impact, it at least is adopting the latest technologies. And so I think this is also a real credit to the mayor by leading the way, so to speak, with the city, by getting the city to commit to achieve, for example, greenhouse gas reductions sooner, and by being out there investing in these plans, we're also hoping to basically create momentum in the private sector to do it too. Yes?
So do you make it a requirement, or, how do you, I'm just curious, what's the reaction of the developers? I'm actually the mayor of Hoboken, right across the river. So
Sure.
thank you very much for your presentation, and we're always trying to look towards what New York City is doing. And so, I wanted to make it a requirement for developers to be green and have green roofs. And in New Jersey, we were told you have to incentivize it. You can't just make it a requirement. So I'm just curious, is it different in New York?
Well, and I'm not sure the precise rule structure and which entity does it. I will tell you that at the state level, I've worked with Bob Martin on a number of things. He's state DEP, I'm sorry, and we've actually talked about wastewater treatment and those issues. I'm not sure whether at the state level they're providing any guidance at the city level for issues like this. But how did we do it? Well, stakeholder engagement is a big part of why Plan YC works. Sometimes you end up adopting a rule because it's the right thing, or passing a law because it's the right thing, and it's against the industry's wishes. But the mayor's attitude, and it's something that I've really taken to heart in the way that we approach these issues, is if you can accept the idea of incremental progress and make adjustments to a rule that are going to accommodate some of the main concerns of stakeholders, like the development community, who's going to have to live with this regulation forever, and you can get as many people trying to stand with you when you announce it because you've made those accommodations, you're going to do a lot better. So the stormwater rule right now, I think we're in the middle of the 30-day comment period, and nobody's picketing outside my house yet. Part of the reason for that is because, number one, we did detailed analyses, and I would love to get you in touch with Carter and the team, our green infrastructure team, because we can kind of go through each of these different things with you, and I'll offer that to anybody else. We'll set up a way to go through that stuff, because it really gets granular in terms of how you do it. But we found that some of our best ideas for how to construct these rules came from the private sector. And they were explaining to us, we thought, well, we'll just, impose the number and then they'll figure it out. But what do you give them credit for? So DEP, and this was interesting, one of the things that had to change the most in order to make green infrastructure and a lot of this sustainability work was the agency itself. Had to change at least as much as we're asking some of the developers to change. That was an agency that I guess I like to describe as likes to build big gray stuff, right? The bigger the better, the deeper and bigger the better, and these little projects that you're going to see by the hundreds and ultimately the thousands are totally different. But now we're seeing, a whole new division of the capital. The water and sewer operations has been built, and they're into it. They are into it because the managers are being rewarded for meeting milestones that are measured in terms of the success of the plan. It's a little long-winded, but I will say, at the end of the day, we were able to get, I think, many of the concerns by, for example, giving developers credit for dry wells and absorption on their property that DEP had never given them before, ever. You know, we were never, our engineers are saying, well, look, a dry well's fine, but what you really want is a pipe connected to the sewer. And if you don't have the pipe connected to the sewer, you know, the dry well's nice, but it's never gonna work. So what I did was I appointed the guy who was the, you know, who made that edict. I appointed him the Assistant Commissioner for Green Infrastructure. Because number one, I figured if he said a certain aspect of the plan could work, I knew it would be true. And this is the kind of guy who would say, oh, well, this is a problem, but I'll just go design something overnight and we'll figure it out. But then also, he had to change his mindset if he was going to be able to actually implement the plan. So, you know, part of it is just also figuring out how to get your own people to think about it in terms of problem solving and not just ramming it down stakeholders' throats. Because you can only do that so much. Anybody else? Okay, well, it's really been a pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, it's quite hard to speak now after you, but okay. My name is Vincent Feltesse. I'm from France, from Bordeaux, and first of all, I'd like to thank the MICD for the invitation. It's a kind of honor for me, and it's also a kind of huge fear for me to be here in Colombia. I'm going to say a few words about me, about Bordeaux, about France, and about town. I think things are very different. Bordeaux is not New York. Paris, even Paris is not New York. There are just 2 million people in Paris, and in New York, 8 million people. So let's go. First, about me. Not my family, not my childhood, but how it does work in France. So I'm a mayor too. This is my town, a small budget. There are 4 quarters in my town, 25% of landscape, 25% of social housings, 25% of factories. I have a huge Ford plant with 4,000 people in Blanquefort and 25% of small houses. And now, Bordeaux. I'm also the president of the urban community of Bordeaux. It's something very strange. I don't think you have it in the States, maybe in Portland. It was created, but it's working, really. It was created in the 60s and the urban area is about 720,000 people. And our main goal is to aim at 1 million inhabitants in 2030. I'm going to explain you why. So this is how it does work. 3,000 people. Our budget is about $1.5 billion. So I am the president. There are 36 vice presidents, and which is more important, official powers. 6 mandatory powers: economic planning, planning and development, social housing, urban policy, services of collective interest, environment, and living conditions. So our job is to make the city. And now, what is the future of Bordeaux and what are our problems? in Bordeaux, like in Nantes or Lyon or Toulouse or when in France, everything was not so bad since the 90s. In France, 75% of public investment come from local authorities. And we all did the same, urban renewal, public transport, public spaces, and city center wasteland reclaimed. And now, what next? First, less money. This is the most important thing. Second, sustainable development issue. Third, population growth and aging. France is a growing country. We are now 65 million people. 10 years ago, we were 59 without immigration. We have a high rate of natality, and the last one, which is very important, social unrest. There were a lot of riots in France in 2005. And so, a few years ago, it was like that in Bordeaux. And now it's like that, a little bit better. It's the same place, with a riverside, with a tramway. And we did it in 10 or 15 years, so very fast. It was also the job of the mayor of Bordeaux, Alain Juppé, and between 1996 and 2006, it was a huge revolution in Bordeaux. When some people in the room are French, it's now really, really different. So, is everything so good? No, not at all. We have a main failure. So, this is a density rate. So, in 1973, almost 50 inhabitants by hectare, and now just 22. And it's no more possible for young people to live in Bordeaux. Everybody is going outside and more and more and more far. So our project is to welcome new inhabitants in Bordeaux. And so the equation is very, very simple. How can we build houses very fast? And this is a real problem for a local authority. In France, if you want to go fast, you have to deal with private developers. But the problem is you can control the quality, you can control the price, and you can control the town you're making. The other side is, it's quite hard to say it here, but the other side is the urban planning, but it's quite slow, between 5 and 10 and 15 years. And so we are trying to find a new way to make the town quite quickly, quite cheaply, but with a sustainable aim and with a social aim. And so I'm just going to show you 2 examples of our way to make the town. I don't know if it's going to succeed. Maybe not, but anyway, we are trying. So it's a few numbers about Bordeaux, just to say that almost every job is in Bordeaux. And to show you, we have a lot of projects. It's not just a dream. We have the high-speed train, we have 2 bridges, we have a new campus, we have a few factories, and so on. So my analysis is this one. A few years ago, the job of a local authority was about urban planning. I'm not sure is our main job now. I think our first job is to do strategy. What we want to do for our town in 15 or 20 years because of sustainable development and what our aim, what our vision, what do we want to do. And we cannot do it alone because we have no more money, so we have to do it with population. I'm a mayor, so there is election, okay. And we have to do it with firms, with cultural actors, with social workers, and so on. So this is the first job. And the second job is to make projects, but not 10 years, between 3 and 5 years. And I think that is my two jobs, strategy and project, and not in the middle. So we began this work 2 years ago. How can we do a metropolis strategy in Bordeaux? The name was Bordeaux Metropolis 3.0, and we made a lot of lessons, conference, and about 15,000 people participate to our workshop. We are today 700,000 people in Bordeaux, and 15,000 people participate. They produce ideas, they answer to a survey, they do some initiative. It was very, very interesting, and the 27 mayors of Bordeaux agree with the aim of 1 million inhabitants and agree with a few ethical values. This is which is different. We have a tramway, we have no problem with waste, we have no problem with water, we have a sustainable development plan, but we want to know also what is our goal, what is our aim, what do you want to do for our town. And we think Bordeaux is different from Lyon, is different from Barcelona, is different from Copenhagen, and this work about philosophy was quite strong and quite important. And so in 18 months we have collective intelligence, or I hope so, and we did a lot of work, and at the end we voted a strategy a few weeks ago, and we create a new tool which is very important. The tool is the Metropolitan Cooperative in Movement. So inside there are local authorities, but also inhabitants, but also the airport, also the port, also the train maker, also social workers, and we are about between 100 and 115. And this is the Metropolitan Cooperative. And when we are all together agree to the aim, everything is okay. And so it's a new way to make policy. There is no election, but we think you are very important in our town, so you have to take part of the action. So this is the first thing. So challenges in Bordeaux are the same in New York or in the States. The last line is very important. Local identities to be preserved. It's something very important for us. I'm not a conservative. I belong to the left party. I'm quite radical. But today, I think it's really important to know who we are, where we live, and there is not just globalization. And so on, reflections, and at the end, the title was The Metropolis of the Five Senses, and these senses are stimulating, sensitive, distinctive, responsible, inclusive. This is our five senses, and this is our value, and that's it. But we have also a plan, but this is very important for us, and everybody agree with this. Second example, how can we build houses quickly, very quickly? 5 years ago, we built about 3,000 houses a year in Bordeaux area. Now it's 6,000 houses a year, and our goal is 10,000 houses a year in 2 or 3 years. It's not because we are megalomaniac or something like that. It's just because we are in a part of France in which people love to come. Every year, 20,000 people come in the great area of Bordeaux. And our aim is that they live in the heart of Bordeaux. And there are young people between 20 and 40. And so the question is, how do we build a kind of Newton for these people, and without segregation? The problem is now the heart of Bordeaux is really beautiful, but when you live in the suburb, I'm a suburb mayor, it's quite different. And we want the same quality between Bordeaux and Lormont and Bègles and Blanquefort. And now Bordeaux is very well known, so there are a few famous architects, urbanism in Bordeaux, but not in the suburb. So the problem is how to have the same quality in all the area. Something is very special in Bordeaux area. We have half nature and half urban. And we want to preserve it, half. And this is Bordeaux area, and I'm not sure you can see, but what is in blue and in pink is the public transport system. And we have 40 kilometers of tramway, and we are building 30 more kilometers of tramway. And so the problem is, the tramway is coming in 3 or 4 years, and we want houses next to the tramway. And if we use zoning or rezoning, we don't go fast enough. So we change the way to build the city. And so the question was very simple. We want to build 50,000 houses next to the tramway in 10 or 15 years. And that's it. Just the question. And it's very important that it's simple, that inhabitants can understand what we're saying. Because I don't know how it is in New York, but in Bordeaux, when you want to understand the rules of urbanism, it's absolutely terrible. So we say 50,000 houses, and we have 5 international teams. Remkulas, for example, Belgium team, Alexandre Chemetov, Lacaton et Vassal, Jamel Clouche, really the best one. And during 1 year, 10 mayors work together with services and with 5 teams to find solutions. And it was really, really, really intensive. We spent a week every month with the 5 teams. So for me, it's a lot of time, about 2 days a month, and that's it during a year. And after, we have a few projects, and now that we have a few projects, we are reasoning. But we do it like that. And during 1 year, we work just with the teams, and now we are working with private developers, with social housing builders, and we are a small cooperative, like I said before. And now it's beginning. We are building houses. And the rule was quite simple. We say 5 years to make the project. Not the 50,000, but between 5,000 and 10,000. And it's working very, very, very well. So this is one of our ideas, but because things are never so simple, inhabitants of Bordeaux are afraid to become a metropole. For them, the goal of 1 million people is awful. So we launched a new project which is called 55,000 hectares for nature. This is the yin and the yang, with the same way. And in January, we are going to begin with the nature. And so it's our new way to make the town. In 15 years, we did a tramway, we did the riverside, we did 1 bridge, but we are thinking that now everything is going too fast, and local authority have to find a new way to build fast for the population. That's it. Questions? But we have also classical projects, what in France we call ZAC, PAE, Opération d'intérêt national. But we are using every tool, and sometimes we are inventing new tools. And I think this is the job of a man.
Is suburban sprawl something that started happening in Bordeaux in the 70s, where it started here more in the 50s?
Bordeaux decreased as a number. In 1945, 62% of the population live in Bordeaux, in the town of Bordeaux, and now it's 35%. So everybody leaves the town to have his own houses. And since 5 or 6 years, it's quite different. But the problem is not just Bordeaux, it's the Bordeaux area. And for us, this is the first aim of sustainable development, that people live in town, but because if it's not the case, they have to get 2 or 3 cars and to spend hours in traffic jam and too. And we have also a green plan, not so performance. That's yours, but.
Relating to Cass Holloway's speech about ecosystem services and valuation of ecosystem services, I'm wondering if you're using any methodology or if there's a consensus in Europe as to what kind of effective methodologies can be used for valuing ecosystem services for sustainability planning.
I don't know if I have the answer. I think we have to mix every methodology. I think it's a good way. But I think one problem we have in France or in Europe with sustainable development, it's too technical. It's something for engineers. And the problem is how to make it true for people. Okay, once they have a small garden, everything is okay. But it's not that easy. I don't know how it's in the States.
I was wondering at what point in the process did you engage those 5 teams? Was there a lot of prior work to define the scope of their investigation and program? Was there a technical team that put together a program for them, or was it much more open-ended?
In France, we have a tool called Agence d'Urbanisme, and we have a lot of maps, a lot of informations, and l'Agence d'Urbanisme told us we can build about 17,000 houses next to public transport. So we have some ideas, but after the great ideas, like in the Great Paris, it's to know that we can do it, but we don't say how we are going to do it. And so the question was very simple: just build it. And we have 30 or 27 teams which answered, international teams, and after we chose 5. But we have a strategy, and we did it after the renewal of Bordeaux. It's not. I think we can do it 10 years ago or 15 years ago. Now it's possible.
I wonder if you could speak a little bit about, you indicated that Bordeaux is heavily a service economy. The jobs for the population, is it still centralized within the Bordeaux area, or has it decentralized?
No.
If you juxtapose it.
Factories are around Bordeaux. And so in the Bordeaux area, there are 750,000 people, and Bordeaux have 200 inhabitants, and Bordeaux have 40% of the jobs. So 60% are outside of Bordeaux. And one of our problems is how to create jobs, because we know people are coming in Bordeaux or Bordeaux area, but we have to create 75,000 jobs in 20 years if we wish no unemployment rate, and this is really, really, really complicated. But this is not very original.
How are you incorporating the new school requirements with all these new houses?
sorry.
You will have to build more school buildings.
Yeah.
So how are you incorporating that into your plan with all these new houses?
Yeah, but it's not that complicated. Jobs are very complicated. School, we know the price. It's about $500,000 for a class in France. And we build schools next to public transport and next to new houses. But this is something quite classical in France.
How do you finance the projects, the 55 houses? Is this a public-private partnership, or do you have developers do the financing?
This is a principle of the Metropolitan Cooperative. We finance them, some of them social houses, for example, but the other one are financed by private developers, and we have negotiations with them with what in France we call cost about density and so on. But I think it's the same everywhere in the world. But you have to know very, very well your territory, and you have to invest a lot of money in studies. Or private developers are more clever than you, and it's not possible. They have more money, okay, more clever, not possible.
Maybe this is the last one.
Yeah.
I was struck by your yin and yang idea that it's either compact, dense, urban, and then outside is protected green space. Yet, you know, when Cass Holloway was speaking earlier about New York, it was sort of more of a network of small green spaces within the heart of the dense urban fabric, which I guess is a challenge to find that density, but also that green infrastructure inside that density. How do you think that might play out in Bordeaux?
But it's a kind of deal between the population and us. We make high density in some places, but in the other places, it's just nature. And so, I'm looking at, this is a question we are asking to the new teams about nature. How do we make the 50% of natural spaces visible? How do we make nature omnipresent in all urban context? How do we turn the UCB cube into a nature territory recognized at national or even European level? How do we make nature accessible to inhabitants? How do we organize local tourism in natural spaces? How do we boost urban agriculture? It's very important for us, and ensure it develops viably. It's always a very simple question.
Yes, I'm wondering when you started this 25-year plan, and how do you plan to adapt it to the current economic crisis in Europe right now?
It's a good question. Bordeaux is a very specific territory because we have a lot of public employees. So crisis is not that intensive in Bordeaux. And our unemployment rate is quite low. But the crisis is strong for the private developers. As they say, we are going to build in 2 or 3 years. But it's too late, I'm sorry, but we are explaining to private developers in France that now the town to be is Bordeaux, between 2010 and 2020, because we are dynamic, because we have nature, because of high-speed train and so on. And in France, they have a few private developers, and they choose between Lyon and Lille and Toulouse. And so we are selling our turn. And it's very important, this idea of a cooperative metropolitan. My first vice president is Mayor of Bordeaux, Alain Juppé. He doesn't belong to the same party than me, but we agree. And when we go to Paris, we are together and we have the same speak, and it's very, very important. And our strategy, we worked together almost 2 years, but when we vote the strategy a few weeks ago, it was voted by Socialist Party, by White Party, by Communist Party, by Ecologist Party, by everyone, and it's very, very important. So I think we have to go to dinner. Thank you.
So I think two absolutely wonderful presentations, and a really almost perfect symmetry between the metropolitan reality of New York City and the metropolitan dream of Bordeaux. But when a city like Bordeaux, with its which is itself a global city, it's a city everybody already knows in some way, because we have been drinking that city for a while. When this place is imagining and carrying out a third growth, growing in size by a third in 20 years, that means a city like Bordeaux is an image of what's happening in a kind of global situation. So I think actually the New York-Bordeaux examples fit very well, because you could also analyze the New York example in terms of a massive increase of efficiency, and increase of efficiency is equivalent to demographic expansion. But of course there is also demographic expansion of 1 million people or so here in New York. So fantastic beginning, again on behalf of the Urban Design Program, and particularly the Director Richard Plantz and his right hand as faculty member Moji Baradley. I want to thank you very much for coming to the conference. You will also be joined in the coming days by the head of the Real Estate Development Program, Vishant Chakrabarti, but also I think Kenneth Frampton from the Architecture Program, and so on. So we try to bring you our very, very best people, but just to say you from the beginning, really the pleasure is entirely ours. I already feel tonight I learned so many lessons, and I think we will, as a school, learn a lot from all of you here. But we will only learn from you if you are still alive tomorrow, and this will require you to eat, which is made a little bit difficult after hearing a speech from Bordeaux, but we do our best. Good night.